Keir Starmer has come under fire for his handling of free speech policies, and this goes beyond a domestic issue.
I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
The Labour leader has long defended certain forms of regulation, but his approach to global free speech, particularly concerning US tech companies, has raised concerns. These tech giants wield massive influence, not just in the UK, but worldwide. Starmer isn't just lying to Americans, I think he's lying to us too. Maybe he's even lying to himself. And worst of all, he's lying to the very principles on which this country was built. So, what do we do about it? We don't sit back and let our voices be taken away, do we? We speak louder, clearer, and we tell the truth to power. We remind Starmer that free speech is not a gift from the government. It is our right as British citizens. It is the cornerstone of our democracy, and we will not allow it to be eroded by vague legislation and contradictory rhetoric. For many, Starmer's role in shaping public discourse with increasingly less accountability has become a growing concern. His policies, which seem to favour stricter regulations, have put him at odds not just with these tech companies, but also with his influential US allies. The issue of free speech has crossed the ocean and has become a political friction point between the UK and the United States. American political figures have begun to intervene, criticising how Starmer's handling of these policies could have unintended consequences, not just for the UK, but also for US citizens. This was precisely the opportunity Donald Trump needed to go after Starmer. There have been infringements on free speech that affect not just the British. Of course, what the UK does in its own country is its business, but this also impacts US tech companies and, by extension, American citizens. Trump held nothing back. He directly attacked Starmer, arguing that his approach to international relations was weak, particularly regarding the protection of US tech companies' interests. According to Trump, Starmer was out of touch with global politics, and his lack of understanding could harm both the UK and the US. But Trump wasn't the only one who criticised Starmer. JD Vance also launched harsh attacks, calling his leadership ineffective, especially on the international stage. But are we really at a point where the success of our Prime Minister is measured by the fact that he wasn't publicly humiliated? According to Vance, Starmer's approach to international relations was not just weak, but also naive. The UK, he argued, needs a leader who can stand firm, defend its interests, and navigate the complex web of relations between powers like the US and China. To Vance, Starmer simply isn't that leader.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
The problem goes beyond free speech. Vance emphasised that the UK's political future was at stake. Weak leadership, he suggested, could alienate crucial allies and fail to protect the UK's interests in the shifting global landscape. Starmer tried to calm the waters with a carefully crafted speech designed to regain control of the narrative and reassure both the public and the press. However, when the time came, his words felt empty. We can stand up for our right to speak freely, or we can watch it disappear faster than a politician's promises after an election. Instead of showing strength and clarity, Starmer's speech was vague and lacking in substance. He spoke in broad terms, promising changes but without concrete details on how he would address key issues, including the controversy over free speech and the criticisms from Trump and Vance. It was not the strong, decisive speech the moment required. It was a weak attempt to paper over the cracks in his leadership. The media wasted no time pointing this out. Headlines highlighted how Starmer's speech failed to inspire or convince. Public opinion reflected the same sentiment, with many doubting whether the Labour leader was ready to handle the pressure of the global stage. Behind closed doors, speculation within the Labour Party grew. High-ranking members began questioning whether Starmer could continue leading in such turbulent times. Some were even privately discussing potential successors.
You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you. Please.
Only 20% of people actually voted for him, and his rating has really dropped. He has the opportunity, after 14 years of really messed up, incompetent, unlistening Tory conservative rule, Keir Starmer and Labour have the opportunity to be real heroes. They could fix all of the many things that are wrong with this country very quickly, some of them in an afternoon, and yet they are proceeding in totally the opposite direction and alienating huge swathes of the British public.
Can you go into a bit more detail? How do you see this playing out for Keir Starmer?
Well, I think that starting out where it hurts the most, pocketbooks, he made a big thing of not raising taxes. And he did mention several particular taxes that he won't raise. But he and Rachel Reeves, his money person, his Chancellor of the Exchequer, the first ever woman Chancellor, do seem intent on raising taxes in areas that they didn't mention. So they will increase inheritance tax, they will increase capital gains tax and hit entrepreneurs. They will, there's some word being mooted, charge so many pence per mile to drive your car in Britain now, which is really going to be incredibly unpopular. And he said that he will not raise the national insurance. In other words, when you get your paycheck, there is a deduction by the government on you and a charge to your employer. So he's not going to touch the employee charge, but he is going to increase the charge to employers, which simply gets passed on. So I think the tax and the money aspect is the first area where he's lost a lot of credibility. The other is freedom of speech. I mean, he's actually emptying prisons of thousands and thousands of pretty serious criminals and filling up their cells with hundreds of people who have posted critical comments on social media. Now, most of them do seem to be very inappropriate things that incited riots and were, hate crimes in themselves. But